Despite doctors and teachers claiming that he would never amount to anything academically or athletically, Scott Sonnon overcame childhood obesity, learning disabilities, and joint disease to be named by Men's Fitness magazine as one of the top trainers in the world, and by Black Belt magazine as one of the most influential martial artists of the century. What amazes me about Scott is that he came out of retirement at the age of 40 for the 2010 World Martial Art Games and won 5 gold medals for the United States in Jiu-Jitsu, submission grappling and MMA against fighters half his age and 100 pounds heavier. Firstly, Scott, welcome to Success Tribe magazine and thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you, Kelly. My pleasure.
Scott, where did you get the drive to go back into competition at the age of 40? And, you already won so many tournaments. What was it within you that wanted to go back into it again?
That's a very challenging question. I'll try and keep it succinct, but the most important aspect is that we change in our performance over time. And for me, it was validating the fact now that aging is not a death sentence, that it's only a belief system that we decide to embrace or challenge. And for me, I had never won a clean tournament. And by that, I mean emotionally sanitized of fear or anger. For me, competition was just a catharsis. I wanted to find a way to encounter stress in the micro of competitive sports and be able to keep a sang-froid composure. I had to orient all of my physical training that way. And I figured if I could finally have that perfect fight where I wasn't crushed by my anxiety, nor was I compelled into rage as it's lost control, that I would be able to extrapolate that into the rest of my life. And it was a challenge. I met my dark night of the soul in the middle of it. I lost the second and third fights consecutively, and I started a downward spiral. My wife came. I could hear her clip-clopping down the stairs of the bleachers coming towards me, and I could feel her on my neck, but I knew at that point that she was the only person that was going to help pull me out of that downward spiral. And she did. We turned it around. She said very critical words to me that no coach really could, because only she knows me, that I didn't need to focus on winning, that no one would remember the win, but everybody would remember how I performed. And I needed to be the warrior that I was. And that was irrespective of whether it was a gold medal victory or a final place, a last place. That pulled me out of the vacuum where I was headed, and all of the avalanche of worry about my reputation, my company, my livelihood was all on the line. And that it became a cornerstone for me of looking at any challenge I face as an opportunity for me to aspire to a higher version of myself. And at that point, I had wrung everything that I needed out of competitive sports.
Just on that point, you talk about wanting to be a high version of yourself. Why do you believe that that's so important for people?
I don't know. I don't know how it would be important for others. I can say how it would be important for myself. The lower versions of myself are disintegrated. My bodily challenges with my learning disabilities and my physical issues and the accumulation of the damage that resulted in my physical issues from childhood obesity up to my joint diseases. They separated my mind and my emotions from my body, and it was only in movement itself. And it doesn't necessarily have to be martial art. I get that now. For me, it was facing stress and being able to hold the integration of my mental aspects, my emotional control, and my physical flow. That martial art was the path for me at the time. But now I understand that it was purely movement, and bringing that integration of all three together in a synergistic effect gave me a quality of life that I've never experienced when I was young. Mm-hmm. So if others are interested in reintegrating those three aspects which stress severs, then I try and share the methods that I stumbled upon, what teachers have given me, and some of the methods that I've had to concoct on my own in order to keep that integration tight.
Sure. You talk about integrating mind, body, spirit, emotions. Do you mind just giving an example so people can understand what happens when they sort of disperse apart and how it's brought back together again by working in the body?
Well, I can give the polls. I mean, it's very obvious because it's interesting. There are two bodies of research that are independent of one another, and up until recently, they had really no crossover. And on one hand you have the catastrophizing perseverance of when things go wrong, you suddenly go into this tunnel vision of catastrophic thoughts. Everything goes bad, and you wonder what's going to happen next. You lose short-term memory. You are unable to hear things clearly. You literally can't see other than what's directly in front of you. And that is not something that you only experience when you're attacked by someone wielding a knife or a gun or a fist. It's something that there's a very specific critical threshold that we experience. And once we step across that, we experience panic or rage. It depends on whether we express it out or in. Either way, in either case, it's still a violence that we visit upon ourselves or others. And that rampant anxiety, that downward spiral, is something that everyone to a degree is familiar with, whether it be from financial stress, emotional, or relational stresses. The accumulation of all of them, just a little bit of stress from every one of the 7 realms of our existence. If it gets to a critical threshold, let's add on high intensity exercise on top of that. And all of that stress, it will shove us into that separation where our mind just spins, it spalls, and our emotions start to plummet, and our physical body feels slow, it feels awkward, viscous. We get riddled with aches and pains. All of the alarm systems start to go off. Now, there's a huge pool of research on this, and that downward spiral is something that most people are acquainted with. In combatives, it's called the vortex. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to understand when you think of the deer in the headlights effect. We have so much sudden noxious stress that we freeze, and we can do that from anything. We could do that wheelchair bound. The stress load becomes too excessive that our body can't process it. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a completely independent body of research called the zone, or the optimal human performance, or flow state. And flow state, or positive psychologists have done an inordinate amount of work to bring this phenomenon to life. And from a physical level, we know this as like runner's high, or second wind, or the elation of just being physically free in our movement. Now, there's a state that happens, a neuroplastic change in our brain, when we experience a physically challenging activity and we persevere through all of the thoughts that try and keep us at our current level of activity. And if we crest that, then the brain adapts, and then suddenly we're more efficient. The brain wants us to be able to do things with greater ease and efficiency. And there's even a huge body of research now from neuroscientists showing that the upper brain, the forebrain, evolved specifically to allow complex movement. So those two ends of the spectrum, the upward spiral, the flow state, where everything feels fantastic, we feel plugged in, connected, and joined at mind, body, and spirit. The other end is that that severance where the mind starts to carry on its own, yet isn't able to bring the body along to respond to what we experience, and the emotions are like a tidal wave that wash over us without control. And in between those two, how to recover from the downward spiral and how to aspire and maintain flow state, that became a life's mission for me. And on my early childhood, recovering from the trauma that I experienced, and the violence and the shame and guilt of my physical and my mental condition, then experiencing tiny moments of just elation, just the exuberance, and yet in the midst of the potentially physically violent environment of martial art, if I could just experience that grace 1 second, I knew that I would be able to extrapolate it out and apply it throughout my life in the lesser anxious or lesser stressful situations. A huge answer. I'm sorry, but it's actually the body of my work, and I've tried exhaustively to pinpoint the moment for each individual, because it's completely specific, where we step in from away from eustress, the positive stress that causes us adaptation and growth and challenge and the connection to our continued potential. One step takes us from eustress into distress. One step, there's a crystallization point. And because of the research I was exposed to in Russia, I realized that we can track it, we can measure it, and we can practice it on a daily level if we're willing to accept just a small level of due diligence in realizing that we have an internal experience of stress. If we start to reconnect with our intuition, not the elusive or ambiguous notion, but the specific physical communication with our inner experience of what's happening to our conscious involvement in it, reconnecting with that gives us an opportunity to come off autopilot and consciously change how we address stress.
So coming off autopilot, as in the autopilot that might send someone into anxiety or a stressful state. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Exactly. So we have anxiety. All of us have anxiety, and we should. And part of that, anxiety is a sign that something important is going to happen. But then, unlike other creatures, we have this second order intention. We can become anxious about our anxiety. As soon as we worry that things are going to go wrong, now we've stepped up into the spin of panic. So when we have anxiety about our anxiety, we worry about going out, we worry about flying the plane, climbing the mountain, worry about if our partner's going to cheat on us, worry about if we're going to get the next paycheck, worry if we can hold our technique or we're going to get injured again in our exercise. All of those contribute to sending us over the edge. So bringing us back to the specific mechanisms, bringing us back to the breath, for instance, will help shut down the alarm systems and shift us over to the tone of the other half of our nervous system, the parasympathetic, to keep us in balance and to keep us mentally plugged in to what's happening, rather than letting it on autopilot spin off into reflex.
Scott, what else do we do to come off that panic system, out of the sympathetic nervous system? So you've mentioned about breathing, nose breathing. If you're going into some sort of an exercise program, what would you recommend for an average person? Just a person off the street.
There are a lot of prohibitions, but we can't remove things. If we try and remove things that are bad, we experience withdrawal symptoms and an absence. What we should try and do is front load more positive, productive mechanisms like increasing our water supply. So if we increase our hydration, now our bones are supposed to float. And if we dehydrate, that inner fluid body around our hard stuff, our bones and our cartilage, gets dry and brittle and sends alarm systems to our nervous system, which decreases our strength and eventually leads to pains and injuries. So all the pains that we're experiencing when we start an exercise program are our body secretly serving us. Well, unfortunately, we experience those aches and pains and we worry, something's wrong. I'm doing something wrong. This is bad. So we've taken the positive alarm system, the communication of our body, and we make a negative out of it. By front loading the body with extra hydration, what we do is we create a salve that allows the nervous system to respond more effectively. So front loading water, front loading protein and complex carbs gives the body in advance what it needs, where most people, we're only taught to eat when the need arises, rather than eating for tomorrow, we're eating for yesterday. So by front loading more protein and complex carbs, we give the longer term energy, the slow energy, a chance to be there when we need it, rather than eating because I need fast carbs right now because I'm so dizzy, I don't know what to do, I can't concentrate, I have to work, I have to drive, I have a headache. All of those withdrawal symptoms can interfere not only with our exercise but our normal life. And then finally, the exhalation is the key. So we can't control our heart rate, we can't bring our anxiety down consciously, or at least I can't. But with the research that is readily available to anyone, you can use your breath to get there. The breath is plugged into both aspects of our nervous system. So if we inhale, and this is why I don't like the bumper stickers that say just breathe, because most people take a big inhale and hold their breath. We're used to that anxious inhalation and brace. But what we need to is when we encounter something that's stressful, like I'm going to be embarrassed if I walk into this class, I'm out of shape, look at all these people in here, they look great, I'm in terrible shape, and all of the catastrophizing starts to happen. If we exhale, we're going to shift over to the other aspect of our nervous system, and it will give us the courage to do so. Courage is not an elusive genetic trait. It's not a DNA print. It's a physical mechanism that we have to foster. And you want to stack all the cards in your favor by front loading protein and complex carbs in advance the day before, increasing your water supply so that you don't dehydrate the fascial tissue and that jelly we call muscle, and allowing your bones to float.
Sorry, how much by? People may be wondering, well, you're saying hydrate, does that mean I have half a glass of water, 3 glasses of water? How much protein would you suggest for an average person who is relatively healthy?
Well, as soon as you awake is your most dehydrated state throughout the day. You'll never be more dehydrated than when you wake in the morning. So as soon as you wake, have 1 glass of room temperature water, add a little bit of lemon. That's going to be the most important hydration you have throughout the day, because it's the sudden change from being inert and horizontal to having gravity impact you when the inner fluid body, the ground substance around the bones and the synovium and the joints needs the extra hydration. So I suggest that wait 15 minutes after every meal and then have another glass. Don't have any water during your meal or before, because it adversely impacts digestion and makes you feel bloated, and you don't eat a sufficient amount. Most people starve themselves. And I'm not talking about, I'm talking about that they don't get a sufficient amount of food in their meals because of the addition of fluids starting to increase the total volume that's for where there's a ceiling. And secondly, for the protein, you have three levels of people. You have we go through this cycle all the time. In the first stage, we're healing. At the healing stage, then you want to have at least a fistful of protein. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you don't want to startle the body with slow moving foods. So if I'm coming, I had a sugar addiction, mm-hmm. and I still do. I avoid all sugar for that very reason, because it's dangerous for me because of, one, my childhood obesity, and two, my family tendency for diabetes. So I have to be very careful. When I first reintroduced, I was vegetarian for a long while, and it started to adversely impact my health. I just couldn't get the sufficient amount of nutrients I needed. So I was very careful about adding just one fistful of protein per meal. It's difficult if you're a vegetarian. If vegetarians have to be aware that legumes, that any type of beans that have high protein content, you want to soak them for a long time in order to make sure that the shells don't cause GI issues, because of we're not able to digest it. So you still need that fistful of protein, but plant-based protein, you need to take your time and due diligence to realize that I've got to prepare this protein for my body to digest it. The complex carbs, I think of, again, 2 fistfuls, but people aren't used to eating that many vegetables. And if they do, it's optimal if you eat it raw, but if your body's not used to it anymore. When I came off of my simple carb addiction, I couldn't eat 2 fistfuls of vegetables. It was just too hard for me to process. So cook it a little bit, steam it a little bit, and that will help expedite it. But eventually, you want to work yourself up to 2 fistfuls of protein and 2 fistfuls of complex carbs.
Scott, just on that point of view, carb addiction, where do you think that stemmed from? You mentioned it goes through your whole family and obesity. Where you had it since you were a very young child, or did it develop through, once you started school and had your issues there at school?
So it was a generational issue. Mm-hmm. I truly believe that around my childhood was when we started to intensify our carb manufacturing, and the inclusion of corn syrup, of high fructose corn syrup, in almost all of the product lines had an adverse impact in order to create sweeteners for everything that we had. And that was mostly introduced during the school system, but it was also at home when everything that we were on welfare. We had food stamps. When steel moved out of the United States to Japan, we had to survive on subsistence. And what the government made available to people who were in families like mine was generally not high quality food. So in order to produce cheap, abundant food sources, you have to decrease quality. And it was the intensification of that food that I think is part of the culprit, because if you look at Depression era of our country in the 20s and 30s, people weren't suffering from the same, I have to dig out the statistics again, but from the same percentage of diabetes as we have now, nor obesity, obviously. So there's a generational issue in our food production, the manufacturing of it, that began around my childhood. I don't know how I'm 43, so this is about 35 years ago. As I shifted awareness to increased food quality, it was difficult. But I could eat less and gain more nutrient value out of it. But I had gained the habit of thinking that I needed to have a certain volume of food in order to get nutrients. Well, the shift from low quality, high volume to high quality, low volume is one of faith. And you have to have the courage to take a meal and then see it, feel it, experience its value. And once you feel the increased energy and changes in your body, then you become more confident that if you repeat that type of meal, the high quality, low volume food, that those changes will continue. It took me years, to be honest. I've only gotten to the point where I feel like I've perfected my individual nutrition over the last 2 years. So, and it's been a lifetime of work.
Yeah, Scott, it seems that people tend to give in so quickly. They're wanting the quick fix, when it comes to weight loss and changing their habits, their lifestyle habits. What would you say to these people?
I'm right there with them. I want an immediate change. Who wouldn't want immediate change? I get it, and I get frustrated with myself, and I need to exhale when that happens, because I need to look long term. If I want sustainable results, if I want these changes to be permanent and not a flash in the pan, if I want to stop wasting my money on products and approaches which will give me a 3-month change and then regress even farther than when I started, then I need to look 2 years down the road. 2 years is the minimum for substantial lifestyle change. 3 to 5 years, you've got it for the rest of your life. But we need to be patient, and it's about an issue that defies patience. So it's a very frustrating. It's a very frustrating change that requires support, because the problems happen in 5 minutes. 5 minutes from now, I start to get dizzy. I waited past 3 hours, and I didn't have a sufficient amount of food earlier, and all of these things and I have to drive, and now I get to sit and speak with you, and all of these things will accumulate. So that's when the issue happens. I can't think about 2 years from now. So the most important thing is to sit down, decide upon one day out of the week. Usually a good day is Sunday night, of planning out, here are my events for the week. Here is where my trouble periods are going to be throughout the day. My afternoon lull, my late night craving, all of those periods, how do I address that? Or my big meeting or my long training session, how do I front load what I need? And when do I prepare it so that I can schedule a time to make sure that I have the sufficient amount of food for me to succeed? Because I want to succeed throughout the week, and I don't want to squander the opportunities that I have by lack of preparation of my food. For most people, and absolutely for me, I'd rather devote 80% of my time to my food preparation than to my exercise. 20% of our time, we spend too much time focusing on our exercise and not realizing that what we're moving is food. So if we have poor quality food, and we're going to end up having poor quality movement, and we're adapting the nutrients or substances that we've consumed. So our exercise becomes a toxic cauldron. We've heated it up, and now our body's going to adapt to it. So it's better for us to focus more on our nutrition than it is our exercise.
Absolutely. Scott, I'm just wondering if you would mind telling our people out there a little bit more about your programs and how they can help them with weight loss, just for the everyday person. I know that many people who might read about your programs might be a little bit nervous about getting involved with them, because initially they were for police, defence force, fire brigade. So are they suitable for everybody?
Well, unfortunately, people think of police and military and firefighters as superior physical specimens, and they're not. The average mortality rate in my country is 54.
Wow.
And the number one killer isn't guns, knives, fires, or bombs. It's stress-related disease. So I traveled around my country for the first 2 years working for my federal government in providing them with a platform to enter exercise. In none of my workshops could we even do a workout because of the level of injuries, illnesses, and diseases from stress, from excessive stress, from distress. So having the honor of working with them gave me the realization that much like in my childhood, much like my father suffered coming back from the Korean War, that it's the excessive stress that competes with our ability to heal and to progress. So the entry level of my programs are first and foremost to free the body from pain, because pain competes for performance at a spinal level. The signal for pain will jip in front of the line and go into our spine before the signal of our brain saying, I want to hold this technique, or I want to run a little bit harder, or I want to lift a little bit heavier. Your body doesn't have a choice. The nervous system usurps control and says, no, the pain signal is more important because the pain is secretly serving us. So we listen to the pain signal, we remove the pain, and there's a way to remove pain. Without going into detail, I put out free programs. Mm-hmm. And the reason I put these out is because it helps me as a professional. If I remove pain from people, then they're more likely to be interested in fitness programs. Mm-hmm. So I have a secret agenda, and that is by helping people heal themselves, we increase the ability of people to have physical movement that's expressive and powerful. So with recuperate.org, with a number 8, recuperate.org, and Intoflow with a U, intuitiveflow.com, intoflow.com, I released free programs that will get people off the couch, off the chair, out of their desk, out of the car, and remove the chronic pain that we've been ignoring or medicating. So by removing pain signals, we're doing ourselves a disjustice. And that first level is the most important level, and it's the one we always return to. We need to return to it even after we finish exercise. Secondly, is when working with people that are suffering from chronic injuries and recovering from illnesses, we need steps. Mm-hmm. I needed steps because my body wasn't able to enter the exercises and movements that I saw other people rendering. So there are entry-level movements that give us the ability to have the same level of physical output without the danger of regaining the pain that we've once had. For instance, to put this into context, in my country, the Yoga Journal, one of the premier yoga magazines in our country, released statistics that yoga in our country has a 9% injury rate. So almost 1 in 10 people are injured from yoga, from the yoga class. Wow. And have to be hospitalized. To put that into context, American football, the most dangerous sport on the planet, has a 14% injury rate. So yoga is very close in our country, the way it's taught.
What are the injuries,
very close to the same danger of physical trauma as American football. And the reason for that is because there's not an entry level, and this is not to indict American yoga instructors. I know they're going to get upset with me when I repeat those statistics. That's not an indictment of the individual. It's an indictment of the standard educational model that we provide. We have a level of people that are experiencing nutritional and physical stress. We have to meet them where they are so that we can step up to the next level. There has to be I use the term regression. A lot of people don't like that term because it has negative connotations. For me, it does not. I always go back to the basics. It was the beginning of my martial art training. There are no advanced techniques. There's only a refinement of the basic techniques. So the regressions for me are primary. They're the most important components. Those steps, in a way that allows me to gain more complex movement, are critical to everyone. And in each one of my programs, there are 4 steps. And it starts with beneath the level where you are, not the next step up. Because as you add intensity to your movement, you need to downshift and make sure that all of the tissues are turned on. As we add stress, our body goes into conservation mode and starts switching off nervous light switches and trying to avoid expenditure. when that happens, that's when we can get injured. So to keep everything switched on, we downshift. The regression is not a punishment. We downshift to turn on the light switches, get our core activated, have our leg drive again, have our shoulder pack, get spinal alignment. Once those things are switched on, then we feel power start to surge through our body, because the first belief system that we have to start with is that the body is innately strong and is the innate healer. If we don't start with those belief systems, we're behind the ball. Once we start with those belief systems, then we have to realize that my only purpose of exercise is to activate the body so it can be strong again, and activate the natural healing cycle so that I can use my healthcare professionals to support me, but I'm the doctor. All of the programs are coded that way. And the last and most important one is we never leave the gym, we never leave our workout, we never leave our house with the hardest thing we've experienced being the last thing that we do. That should be halfway. We need to compensate for any stress that we feel. And we know this mentally and emotionally, but we don't do it physically. So all of the programs have built in, we use the term cool downs as conventional expression, but our cool downs are awful in general. They're unrelated and they're insufficient. They have to be laser targeted specific. So if I do one specific motion, I have to do the opposite to compensate for it. If I'm curling weight up to my chest, I need to be in locust position to get full elbow extension. That's the only way to restore resting length. So we have to be very intelligent about the design of the program, specifically preparing to enter the exercise, us as individuals, and specifically unloading the tension so that we leave our workout with more energy than when we started.
Listen, Scott, there's just so much information that you've covered in the last 39 minutes. We originally were going to run for about 15, but I couldn't stop you.
I'm sorry.
And no, it's just been wonderful hearing about your programs, and I'm sure that people listening, in Success Tribe will be fascinated with what you're saying about exercise, the reality of exercise, how it can damage your body if you do the wrong exercise, and if you don't start slowly, and if you don't regress initially. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about before we leave today?
I'm reluctant because I know that one of my most difficult exercises is stopping. So I'm gonna keep it there. I do want to express an invitation. If anybody has any questions about anything that we've covered, the most accessible way to get a hold of me and for any explanation of what I've said is through Facebook. I'm very accessible, and no matter what country I'm in, even if my email's down, I can get onto Wi-Fi and pick up Facebook. We have a really great community, and the interaction between everyone is the most important part. If you don't have a chance to access our community that we've created on Facebook, find one, because you're no longer on your own. When you're no longer restricted to brick and mortar, much like what you've done. If you reach out, there is an enormous wealth of individuals who will be willing to help and support you. If you need to make a 2-year change, you need to have allies. So get people on your side, reach out, express the challenges that you're facing. Don't hide them, embrace them. And once you share them, you will get the help that you need.
Scott Sonnon, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. For more information on Scott Sonnon's TACFit programs, please go to the fitness section of Success Tribe Library or click on the links below.